He's your brother. He works in the hospital, and he still can't do anything. That's what my uncle said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, while my parents just nodded, too ashamed to look at me, too proud to defend me. My little brother was clinging to life after a sudden cardiac rupture, and all they could say was that I was useless, the same boy they used to call extra baggage, the one they never brought up in family Christmas letters, never introduced proudly at church, never asked for help unless it was too late. Even when I graduated top of my class, even when I stayed through 72-hour shifts to save strangers, even when I made it to the operating room through blood, sweat, and grit in my hair, to them I was never enough. I was never him. But that day, when the head surgeon scrubbed in, when the hands that held the scalpel were mine, when the boy on the table was my brother, and every beat of his fragile heart counted, I didn't do it for them. I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because despite everything, I still knew what it meant to love without being loved back. The surgery was a success. The attending physician told the family the results were exceptional. And when they asked who led the operation, their faces fell, their words dried up, and for the first time in years they couldn't look me in the eye, not because I failed, but because I didn't. You want to know what I did when they found out? Keep listening. My name is Simon. For most of my life, I've been the son they forgot, the brother they criticized, the man they dismissed, but I've carried more than scars. I've carried strength they never bothered to see. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments, or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes, even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. And if this story touches you even a little, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you. And now, here's my story. There's a letter on my kitchen table, still sealed. 2 weeks now. It's from my mother. Technically, her handwriting is unmistakable, all looping cursive and unnecessary flourishes, like she's trying to impress someone who stopped looking a long time ago. It's an invitation to Sunday dinner. I haven't opened it, not because I'm busy, no, but because I already know what it says. Ethan will be there. Chloe too. And if, by some miracle, Dr. Simon Rowe has a moment to spare, then sure, he's welcome. That's how it always goes. I live alone in Portland now, not far from the hospital. It's a tidy apartment. Quiet. Efficient. Like me. Today, I finished a 12-hour shift and performed a high-risk heart surgery on a 70-year-old woman who hugged me through tears afterward. That woman's family called me a lifesaver. I came home to a microwave meal and silence. No lifesavers here. I was born and raised in Redwood, Oregon. My parents, Ellen and Joseph, were small-town royalty. Church every Sunday. Lawn trimmed like a postcard. 2 daughters and a son who were supposed to be the picture of wholesomeness. Ethan was sunshine. Ethan smiled and clung to Mom's skirt and told knock-knock jokes with glitter in his voice. He was the heart of the home, as Mom would say. And me. I was bookish. Reserved. So serious. I liked puzzles, anatomy kits, learning the Latin names for bones when other boys were learning football plays. I remember once overhearing my mother whisper to a friend, "Simon is bright. Too bright, maybe, but cold. Like granite." I was 13. I remember looking up that word. Granite. Strong. Unmoving. Alone. There's a photo in my wallet, yellowed at the corners of my medical school graduation. I'm standing stiff in my white coat, holding a certificate of academic excellence. My father's in the background, not quite smiling. My mother didn't attend. She was busy getting Ethan ready for a debate. I think that was the night I stopped expecting anyone to show up for me. Tonight, I get a text from Chloe. Dinner this Sunday. Ethan's flying in. Mom said, if Simon's not too busy, he can come. No, our Simon. No, your brother. Just Simon. Like I'm the neighbor's kid they tolerate because he mows the lawn. I scroll Facebook absent-mindedly. A girl I vaguely knew from high school posted a picture from a recent visit, stopped by Aunt Ellen's. Ethan's still as handsome and sweet as ever. And her brother. I think he's a doctor or something. Didn't catch much about him. The caption stings more than it should, not because she forgot, but because that's exactly what I've become, someone people forget to mention. Before bed, I pull out the photo of me and Ethan at the beach. We were maybe 7 and 4. Ethan's laughing, sand stuck to his cheeks, arms thrown wide. I'm next to him, unsmiling, looking directly into the lens, dead serious, even then, as if I knew the future would require it. Sometimes I wonder, if I disappeared, how long would it take them to notice? It was a Friday evening, and I was less than 15 minutes from signing out of my shift when my pager buzzed, urgent. I called back, expecting a routine consult or maybe a post-op complication, but the voice on the other end, clipped and breathless, said, "We need a cardiothoracic surgeon stat. Transfer from Rose Valley General. Male. 33. GC's 7. Suspected cardiac rupture following an MVA. Are you available?" I said yes before I thought to ask more. It wasn't until I opened the incoming file that the name stopped my breath cold. Ethan Rowe. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Ethan. My brother. The family jewel. The one who hadn't called me gay in over a decade. The report was clinical. Heart trauma. Loss of consciousness at the scene. Pupils reactive but sluggish. The location, Rose Valley, was 2 hours away. The city where Ethan's ex-girlfriend lived. The pieces fell into place in my mind. Sharp and undeniable. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. The surgical team didn't know our connection, and I intended to keep it that way. Emotion has no place on an operating table, not when someone's heart is tearing apart inside his chest. I told the charge nurse, "You don't need the full story. Just know I'm the attending on this case. That's all." She nodded and moved on. I scrubbed in with my heart tucked tightly under my lab coat. When they wheeled Ethan in, I felt something inside me fold. His chest was partially shaved, his face drained of all that effortless joy he carried like perfume. His vitals were dropping. The CT scan showed a tear pressing on his heart. The oar went quiet the moment the drill hit bone. 7 hours of focused chaos. Bleeding vessel clamped, swelling monitored, pressure reduced. One wrong move and he'd either never wake up or wake up someone else entirely. And through it all, I remembered. I remembered the time Ethan shattered Mom's favorite vase, and I took the blame without a word. Mom didn't ask questions, just looked me in the eye and said, "You're his brother." That's what older siblings do. I was 8. I wondered as I placed the final stitch what Mom would say if she knew I'd just saved her favorite child's life. Would it be, "You're his brother. That's what you're supposed to do"? Or would I finally get more than a nod of acknowledgement? The team congratulated me when we finished. "Excellent work, doctor," one of the residents said. I only nodded. My throat felt too tight to speak. I didn't go to the waiting room. I didn't call anyone. I walked to my car, hands trembling just slightly, and sat there with the engine running. The lights from the hospital cast long reflections across the windshield like some silent applause I didn't earn. I stared at my hands, still smelling faintly of antiseptic. I saved my brother's life, and no one knew. I arrived early the next morning, white coat, crisp, badge clipped, clipboard in hand like armor. I told the attending staff I'd return to monitor the critical post-op case, strictly professional. And it was true, in the technical sense. Ethan was stable now, moved to the ICU. He was conscious, barely. His vitals were improving. But the swelling had taken its toll. He was groggy, disoriented. The nurse on shift said he asked for water, and then immediately fell back asleep. I stood at the observation window, looking in. I had requested not to interact directly, something about maintaining clinical boundaries. Truth was, I wasn't sure who I was in that room anymore. His brother, his surgeon, or the ghost in between. Around 9:40 a.m., I heard the shuffle of familiar voices before I saw them. Mom, Dad, Chloe. They walked through the sliding glass doors of the ICU like a grieving royal entourage, eyes wide with fear and hope. I didn't move. I stood off to the side, outside the glass, invisible, in plain sight. Mom rushed to Ethan's bedside, brushing her hand against Ethan's arm. "Sweetheart. Oh, baby. You're okay. You're okay." Chloe hovered nearby, trying to look strong, jaw clenched. Dad spoke to the nurse with that quiet, measured voice he always used when he didn't know how to show fear. Then Mom turned to the staff and said, "Who did the surgery? Please, we just want to thank them. Whoever they are, they saved our son." A nurse pointed toward the surgical roster, hesitating. I didn't move, didn't wave, didn't blink. I heard the echo of my own name in Mom's voice, only it wasn't mine. "Who was the doctor?" she repeated. The charge nurse kept her mouth shut. Bless her. But a younger nurse, just off rotation and clearly out of the loop, offered too much honesty too fast. "Oh, it was Dr. Rowe. He was incredible. I think he said it was his brother." Silence. Dense, shattering silence. I saw Mom's face morph into something unreadable. Dad's lips parted but no sound came. Chloe's eyes darted to the glass. Found me. Frozen. I walked away. I didn't rush. Didn't turn back. Just walked down the hallway with measured steps and a heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. They caught up with me in the courtyard. I knew they would. I was sitting on the far bench, sipping hospital coffee that tasted like cardboard. Mom sat down beside me. She didn't touch me. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. Not angry, just small. I stared ahead at the empty fountain. "Because if you knew, you would have asked for someone else." "That's not true," she said quickly. I finally turned to her. "Isn't it? You've always believed Ethan needed protection. But me? I was the one who was always too cold, remember? Too rational. Too clinical." She looked away. Chloe stepped forward like she wanted to say something. "Thank you," she managed, but the words cracked halfway. Dad nodded, his usual expression of approval unspoken, shallow. I stood, ready to leave. "I don't need credit," I said. "I just needed him to live." The email came through the hospital's internal messaging system, flagged with a mild priority. "Patient Ethan Rowe has been moved to general recovery. Vital stable. Prognosis positive." Attached beneath that was a forwarded invitation, an RSVP request for a thank you lunch hosted by the Rowe family, intended to honor the medical team involved in Ethan's recovery. The email hadn't come directly to me. It had been routed through the coordinator's desk, like a memo passed down the line to someone replaceable. I stared at it for a moment, then clicked accept. The lunch was held in the hospital's south atrium, an airy space dressed up with rented white linens and lukewarm buffet trays. There was a banner, "Thank you for saving Ethan," printed in bold navy blue like a school fundraiser. People milled around. Surgeons, nurses, administrative staff. I stood at the edge of it all, a glass of flat lemonade in my hand, wearing the same blazer I wore when I defended my residency thesis. No one approached me. No one looked twice. Midway through, Ellen stood to give her speech. She wore a floral scarf I hadn't seen since high school. Her voice was steady. "Our family is deeply grateful," she said, her hand gripping Joseph's. "We never imagined the miracle we received. Ethan is here today because of the brilliant team at this hospital." Her eyes skimmed the room, but not me. "To each of you who cared for him, we thank you. You saved his life." Polite applause. I didn't move. A nurse sitting beside me, older, with hair pulled into a tight bun, leaned in and whispered, "Strange. I thought they'd say your name." I smiled. I'm used to being invisible. After lunch, I headed toward the exit, walking past the columns of white and blue balloons they tied to the stair railing. Chloe caught up with me in the hallway, his tie loosened, face uncertain. "You're not mad?" he asked quietly. That Mom didn't say anything. I paused. I didn't do it for her. But still, I did it because it was the right thing to do. That's enough. But it wasn't entirely true. Some small, echoing part of me had waited for even one sentence, even one glance, even a simple, "That's him." It never came. As I reached the main lobby, my phone buzzed. A voicemail notification from the Oregon State Medical Board. I called back. "Dr. Rowe." The voice on the other end said, warm but formal. "We'd like to inform you that you've been shortlisted for the state's Surgical Leadership Committee. The announcement will be made next week. Congratulations." I stood still for a moment. Recognition. Respect. From people who didn't know my past or question my worth. From people who judged only by merit, not by memory. I made my way back through the corridor, past patient rooms lined with quiet monitors and sterile whiteboards. Through the glass of one room, I saw her. Ellen was gently wiping Ethan's forehead with a damp cloth. Ethan stirred, blinking awake. For a brief second, our eyes met through the pane. Her expression was unreadable. Part surprise, part confusion. I stopped just for a beat. Then I kept walking. I could save his life, I thought. But I couldn't unlock that door myself. The invitation came with a gold seal from the State Medical Innovation Board, a closed-door roundtable with the top surgical leaders in Oregon, discussing the blueprint for a new cardiothoracic training center. I almost deleted it out of habit, assuming it was a bulk email, but my name was printed on the top line, not as a guest, as a featured panelist. So I went. The room was full of crisp white coats and practiced confidence, voices exchanging acronyms like currency. And then, in a pause between sessions, I saw him. Liam Thatcher. Grayer at the temples, but unmistakably the same Liam who once hovered beside me through my first night shift at Johns Hopkins. He had been my mentor, my benchmark, and at times, the only person who saw beyond my last name. He smiled, warm but sharp-eyed as always. "Simon Rowe," he said, raising his glass of conference coffee. "Didn't think Oregon could keep you this quiet for long." We made small talk about surgical robots, residency applications, budget constraints. Then he tilted his head and added, "You never told me you had a brother." I froze for a heartbeat. "Didn't think I needed to," I said evenly. He chuckled. "Come on. You save your own family member's life and don't mention it. That's a new one." I gave a tight smile. The fewer people know, the fewer expectations they pile on top of you. He didn't push. But I could feel the question hanging there, the one I'd learned to sidestep long ago. How can someone be so precise with a scalpel and so fragmented at the dinner table? That evening, a message lit up on my phone. Ethan, his first contact since leaving the hospital. "Simon, thank you. I don't really know what to say. Mom told me you didn't want to see me." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't reply, but I opened it again and again. I couldn't decide whether I was angry or just exhausted from waiting for apologies that might never come. The next day, my phone rang. Unknown caller. I answered out of instinct. "Simon." Ellen's voice crackled on the line, soft and tentative. I didn't know where to start. "I guess, thank you." I said nothing at first. Then, "Do you want to thank the doctor or apologize to your son?" There was silence. I kept going. "Do you remember what you told me when I chose cardiothoracic surgery? You said I was just trying to prove something. That it wasn't about healing people. It was about ego." Still silence. But this time, I let it hang. After the call ended, I walked to the hospital park. I sat on a bench under the old oak tree near the pediatric wing. A little boy tripped while chasing bubbles, scraped his knee, and let out a sharp cry. His mother rushed over, arms wide, voice full of comfort. "I got you. Mommy's here." I watched them quietly. I'd never heard those words myself. Not when I fell. Not when I bled. But in that moment I realized something. I didn't need to anymore. The invitation was embossed in silver and blue, formal and flattering. Men in Medicine. A celebration of resilience and revolution. I was asked to be a featured speaker in Seattle to share my journey not just as a cardiothoracic surgeon, but as a man in a field that still measures authority by voice pitch and facial hair. I almost declined. The idea of standing on a stage, talking about strength when I hadn't spoken to my own family in weeks felt like some cruel irony. But I said yes, maybe because part of me still believed words could heal, even if they never came from the people I wanted them from most. The event hall was filled with bright lights, writer names, and the low hum of ambition. I delivered my talk with a practiced steadiness, recounting the invisible labor of men like me, expected to endure, succeed, and never ask for applause. When I stepped off stage, the applause was generous. But what stunned me wasn't the clapping. It was the sight of Ethan, sitting near the back, next to Chloe. His hair was still thin from the trauma, his movements cautious, but his eyes were full of something unfamiliar. When our gazes met, he stood and whispered, almost too soft for the world to hear, "You're not invisible, Simon." Not to me. I smiled but didn't answer. I wasn't ready for the kind of hope his voice carried. Later that evening, Ethan approached me quietly and asked if we could get coffee, just the two of us. I agreed warily. We ended up at a small cave tucked between a bookstore and a bike shop, the kind of place with chipped mugs and earnest music. We sat in a booth by the window, both unsure where to begin. Ethan stirred his drink for a long time before saying, "Do you remember when I fell down the stairs when I was 6? I blinked, surprised by the question. "Of course, you split your knee open. You were the one who bandaged me up," he said, eyes still on his cup. "I still remember. Your hands were shaking, but you tried to make it better. Then Mom walked in and told you to stop playing doctor, that you were just making it worse." The memory was sharp. I had been 12, barely taller than the kitchen counter, but already taught that stepping in meant overstepping. I didn't say anything. There wasn't much to add. Some wounds don't scar skin. They bruise memory. Ethan looked up, eyes glossy. "When I found out you were the surgeon, I felt ashamed, because I used to say you never did anything kind for me, that you didn't care." I inhaled slowly. "You weren't wrong," I said. "I wasn't kind. Not to you. Not to me. I was too busy proving I deserved to exist." He didn't speak. Neither did I. The silence between us didn't feel heavy, just necessary. When it was time to leave, we stood awkwardly near the door. Then, without warning, Ethan reached out and hugged me. His arms around me were soft, hesitant. I stood still. My own arms hung useless at my sides. As he stepped back, I looked at him. Really looked. For the first time in years, I didn't see a rival, a mirror, or a mistake. I saw someone who had been just as lost as me. I walked away into the evening chill, my breath fogging in the Seattle air. I used to think he never needed me. But maybe I was the one who left first. The hospital's recognition ceremony was meant to honor surgical teams who'd performed extraordinary feats that year. I was named the guest of honor. There were speeches, plaques, even a montage. But what stole everyone's attention wasn't the scrub colors or the fancy hors d'oeuvres. It was the headline that spread quietly after. "Estranged brother silently saves his own." The article was tucked in the back of a local medical journal, but it found its way online, where people love a redemption arc. Comments poured in. Praise, speculation, sympathy. And then came the one line that tightened something deep in my chest. "The brother cast aside becomes the quiet savior." I didn't respond publicly, but someone else did. "Are you trying to humiliate me?" Ellen's voice on the phone was sharp, brittle. "You couldn't just stay quiet." "I didn't ask to be written about," I replied calmly. "They asked me to speak at a medical conference." I told the truth. "If the truth embarrasses you, maybe that's not my burden." There was silence. Then the line went dead. She hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't chase after her silence with apologies. That evening, Liam sent me a message. Found this in the old yearbook archives. Thought you might want it. Attached was a scanned image of my high school essay. The title read, "The Hero in My Life." I frowned, unsure what I'd written. I was 17 and bitter by then, wasn't I? But there it was, in my own handwriting. My little brother has a light I never had, but if he ever needed it, I'd be the steady darkness beneath his feet to help him shine. I didn't remember writing it, but it felt real. Honest. Like a promise I made before all the resentment and silence built up. A few days later, I stopped by the house where I grew up. Ellen answered the door, visibly uncomfortable, like she'd been caught mid-confession. "I'm here to see the patient," I said. "Not you." Ethan was propped up in bed, pale but smiling, his strength returning in pieces. "I've been remembering things," he said softly. "Little things. Times you were there, but I didn't see it." I sat on the edge of his bed and took his hand. "I don't need you to remember," I said. "I just need you to live." The sun was setting when I left. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the walls I once tiptoed through like an unwanted guest. This house had never felt like home, but as I stood there I realized something had shifted. Not in the house, but in me. I always thought I was just the shadow, but maybe I was the landmark they never knew they needed to find their way. They held the memorial at the Grand Redwood Hall, a place our family reserved only for the grandest affairs. Weddings, anniversaries, retirements. And now, the farewell for the only man in our lineage who had seen me fully, my grandfather. I had promised him once, during one of our long afternoon talks on his porch, I won't let them define me. So I went. Not for them. For him. The room was adorned in white lilies and old photographs, a curated timeline of legacy. Ethan had a solo portrait, framed delicately. Chloe's face was in full color, standing beside our mother at some school award ceremony. I had one photo, a childhood shot where I stood in the middle, but my face was half cut out by the edge of the frame. Someone nearby squinted and asked, "Who's that in the middle?" "Oh," my mother said without blinking, "some distant cousin." I didn't flinch, but inside, something sharp curled and pierced. Ellen's speech was elegant and restrained. She praised Ethan's strength, Chloe's support, and the dedicated medical team that helped pull Ethan through. My name was never spoken. Not once. Chloe glanced at me across the table, clearly uncomfortable. She started to lean forward, maybe to interrupt, but his wife placed a hand on his arm, and she stopped. Then an unexpected voice rose. "I just want to say something," my great-uncle Robert said, rising slowly from his seat. "I want to thank my nephew, Dr. Simon Rowe, for saving Ethan's life. Seems like the family forgot." The room froze. You could hear glasses set down with caution. Ellen gave a tight-lipped smile. "Well, it was his job, wasn't it?" I stood, not out of anger, out of necessity. "It wasn't a job. It was family," I said, and it's time I spoke. No trembling, no quiver, just clarity. I talked about the times I sat at birthday tables, unnamed, the graduations he skipped, the years I existed only as the boy who could carry their expectations, but never their pride. I didn't accuse. I didn't cry. "I'm not here asking for acknowledgement," I said. "I'm here to remind you that a son who wasn't loved doesn't mean he wasn't lovable." The room remained silent, but I wasn't. From my bag, I pulled out an old slip of paper. The ink was faded, but I'd memorized the words long ago. My grandfather's last letter to me. "Simon, don't let your kindness become your weakness. Let it be your compass." I walked out as the sun dipped behind the tall pines, my white coat over my arm like armor I no longer needed to wear, but still chose to. They stared at me like they were seeing someone new, but I didn't turn back. I don't need them to say my name anymore, because for the first time, I can hear my own worth. A week after the memorial, I got a call from Ethan. His voice was unusually quiet. "Mom's getting her heart checked. The doctors say she might need a procedure. I know it's a lot to ask, but if you're free, Could you come see her? Not as a doctor, just as you. I stared at the wall of my office for a long time after hanging up. The words echoed louder than they were said. Not as a doctor, just me. When I entered her hospital room, Ellen was lying alone in the sterile space, bathed in that cold, fluorescent light that makes everything look a little more fragile. No flowers, no visitors, just the constant beeping of machines. She turned her head away when she saw me. I didn't ask about her vitals or prognosis. I just sat down and said, about what I said the other day. I'm not sorry. Her reply came sharp but quiet. I wasn't expecting you to be. We sat in silence for a long time before she spoke again. You were always like your father. The way you watched people, the way you held everything in. Her eyes were distant, looking through me rather than at me. I never knew what to do with that. My breath caught. It was the first time in over a decade she'd mentioned him. My father died when I was 14, and his memory had become something soft and distant, like a picture you don't look at often because it hurts to remember. She went on. Every time I looked at you, I felt weak, and I hated that feeling. You were the reminder of all the things I couldn't be. I thought back to the day I got accepted into the top medical program in the state. I'd run home, glowing, shaking with joy, expecting something, anything. All she said was, another degree to hang on the wall. At the time, I told myself it was just her way, that maybe she was trying to keep me humble, but it chipped something in me. I was scared, she murmured. If I praised you too much, you'd grow wings and leave, and I'd be alone sooner. It took me a moment to absorb that. I asked, did you ever love me? The question floated between us like a live wire. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers twisted at the corner of the blanket. Then finally she said, I didn't know how to show it, but I don't think I ever hated you. And maybe that's the best I could offer. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a revelation. It wasn't enough to undo years of silence, of bruised moments I'd bandaged alone. But it was something. I stood and placed my hand gently on the edge of her bed. If that's all there is, I accept it, not because it heals everything, but because I won't let it keep wounding me. She turned her face toward the window. No embrace, no parting words, but her hostility had vanished, and maybe that was enough. I walked out of the room into the late afternoon light. The hospital's atrium glowed in soft gold, the kind that makes the air feel forgiving. Chloe stood near the elevator, fiddling with his phone, eyes lifting the moment he saw me. He looked like he wanted to ask 1,000 things. Instead, I beat him to it. It's not fixed, I said, but it's not a wound anymore. He nodded, didn't press, and I finally felt something lift. Not a happy ending, but a closing. I don't need my mother to become the woman I always wished she was. I only need to stop being the little boy still waiting for her to change. 6 months later, I was no longer the head of the trauma surgery team. The title, the pager, the endless adrenaline-soaked hours, they were all behind me. I'd taken a part-time faculty position at a local community college. When word got around, the reactions were exactly what I expected. My friends were surprised. My colleagues were disappointed. Some even looked at me like I'd given up. But I hadn't. I just chose to fight on a different battlefield. I'm not leaving the front lines, I told a former resident. I'm choosing to fight at the root. My classroom was filled with men who carried a quiet fire in their eyes. Former waiters, night shift nurses, single dads balancing textbooks with diaper bags. They weren't the polished, overconfident med school candidates I used to mentor. They were real, raw, hungry. On my first day, I didn't start with a lecture. I stood in front of the class and asked, how many of you have ever been told by someone you love that you're not good enough? Nearly half the room raised their hands. I nodded slowly. I've been in your seat. No one thought I'd become anything. But I did, because I believed it before anyone else did. Later that week, I found a letter on my desk. Handwritten. Ethan's handwriting. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. I told Mom and Dad everything about you. They didn't know what to say. How could they? But I knew what to say. I'm proud to be your brother. Tucked inside was a photo. It was Ethan, still in his hospital gown, holding the hand of a nurse. My hand. The moment captured was quiet, tender. A reminder that some wounds, when properly tended, don't scar. They transform. That evening, I walked home without my usual rigid posture, without the weight of a laptop slung over my shoulder. The streets were the same, but I wasn't. I stopped by a small shop I'd passed 100 times before. Inside, I picked up a pair of soft leather gloves. "What are you using them for?" the clerk asked, half curious. I smiled. To teach people how to hold a scalpel. Not to fight, but to heal. That night, in the stillness of my apartment, I stood by the window. The space was modest, but every inch felt earned. The degree still hung on the wall, as did the framed photos from my intern days. But at the center now, right where my eyes would land when I entered, was Ethan's letter, framed carefully, as if it were a diploma in its own right. I had once been the shadow in my own family. But here, in this small corner of the world, I had become a quiet light. Not one that dazzled or blinded, but one soft and steady enough to help someone else find their way. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Sometimes, the greatest healing doesn't come from being acknowledged by others, but from no longer needing their approval. Life has a way of testing our silence, our patience, and our worth in the shadows. But those who walk quietly often carry the deepest strength. You don't have to shop to matter. You don't have to win their love to become whole. All you need is to keep choosing your truth, even when no one claps for it. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what part spoke to you. And if you'd like to walk with me through more stories like this, don't forget to follow and subscribe. Your presence here means more than you know. Thank you, truly.